background to take my paint, which will form the backdrop of this. Okay, I'm going to let it dry just for a couple of minutes, and then I'm going to work on top of that snowy ground and the sky. Then you've got the woodland in the background, which is a mixture of kind of reddy brown and the green. So I'm imagining this is just a made up sort of landscape idea, but in the background of where the bird is sitting, there's a sort of imaginary horizon of the green. So that's straight into the wet paint there. So I want to keep it nice and soft, and then we're sort of imagining maybe some trees and things there as well, so some soft browns. So I'm using my flat brush just because it's larger, just to blend some colour in there. Should dry quite nicely hopefully, and then you come down into an area of imagined snow. So that's essentially white, but we just need to add just a little bit of dappled texture in there. So we just sort of maybe footprints or something through the snow there. And then I'm going to let that get a touch darker as it comes down. So I don't mind if it goes across a little bit, because I am going to be painting onto the bird. I'm going to be painting, all of this is going to be much darker on the bird, but I've preserved the areas that I definitely want white here, the snowy areas, with the masking fluid. So this is drying, and what I'm going to do is add a little bit more depth of colour to the back as it's drying. I'm just imagining it's like a forest line there, just adding a little bit of horizon. But because it's snowy, there's no real indication that it's got snow on the back, or that snow has fallen into the woods. This is all just very loose, but what I'm going to do is just take a bit of that colour away, just to add some lightness into there, just to exaggerate that sort of frosty image of just light, a little bit more light, reflected light in there, bearing in mind we're supposed to be having the snow in the foreground, sitting in that field. So just take that away, so it's just a touch harder of a edge there with the tissue. It's creating, you can see it's creating the line of the tissue there, so just be quite careful you don't have too many repeat shapes there. And then if there's anything further down here that you want to take away, and do the same, and just let that dry. Happy to take this away now from the beak. So take the beak masking fluid away, because we can work on top of that now, but leave the masking fluid on the top of the head for highlight there, and any of the highlights that we're going to need when we're washing in this brown tone for the bird. Now I'm going to work into the bird. These are the colours that I'm going to use. So blue, that's not a very good blue to show you. There's a blue. Basically your blues and your rust colours will make browns and greys, and then you've got a magenta red, you've got a bright red, that'll be good for the breast. So just laying down that first wash of colour at the moment. So make yourself the mid brown for the back. We've put some masking fluid on here at the back, so that's going to keep that white for the moment, and we can give that impression that there's some snow sitting on the top of the bird there, or highlighting the feathers, whatever we decide to do with that. So transition your brown by wetting, adding other different tones here. So we're moving into some golden yellow there, and perhaps some beige colour there as well. And we're going to move into the grey as it comes up further towards that breast. Got the white which will stay because of the masking fluid. I'm just going to wash that out to pale here, and then while it's still wet, so we get a little bit of a blend, I'm going to start looking at this red breast here, which is a combination of the two reds. So we've got a slightly deeper colour here as it comes forward, and a little darker tone here. Side it's going to go into more of an orangey red towards the top as it's getting smaller, a smaller space to work. Just moving into using another brush, adding a bit more of this golden colour to make the red redder. It's not quite working at the moment. Okay, quite like the way that sort of bleeds into this area here. It's quite nice. Need a hard line between the beak and the body, so we can adjust this colour. But I have to just keep going to keep that flow. A few white spaces are quite nice when it comes to feathers. It just adds a bit of texture. So I'll let that dry. I'm going to work on all the browns now at the same time. So I'm going to use brown here for the back of the bird. It gets darker here underneath. And then I'm going to, while I've got brown on the palette, I'm going to be working into these twigs here. So I'm going to use what I started with here on the palette, but I'm going to intensify the colour as I go along. So I'm building up. We've left an area of very pale here, so I'm just going to wash that in very lightly. So that's what I needed. I needed that highlight area to stay. So I'm just going to put some texture in there just to get that done first. It's not completely flat white. Similarly, I shall do the same kind of thing here on the breast. It's a lighter area that started to kind of show here. Get that done out of the way, wash it through with a little bit of water, and if it gets too dark, just add it away. Just do it till it feels right. Okay, and then similarly here, I've got another area of light that I wanted to keep. Just put some texture in there, ready to go. Okay, now I'm going to start working on the brown area into the back, and just really trying to enjoy the process of making small marks to indicate the feathers. So I'm trying hard not to apply completely flat colour, and every so often I'm bringing in plain water to blend the strokes that I've put down and leaving little gaps in between. I'm just going to define this horizon there where it goes back into trees, just to give a bit more sense of it being in a landscape. So I'm going to wet just a touch and add a darker suggestion of perhaps some trees there sitting along that horizon line. So just this little bit of depth which suggests there is a forest or something beyond there. So these dark areas would suggest you're looking into a landscape which kind of keeps on going through an area of shadow. You could actually put individual trees in here if you want to spend some time, but just remember, if you do that, they would be essentially out of focus, as if you're looking at a photograph which is just been focused on the bird and not the trees beyond, because if you do them really hard lined and individual, it will start to bring that area more forward than this area and take your focus away from the bird. So we could add some bits of white paint here coming across to make it look like snow, depending on how you feel about making the picture Christmassy, if that is what you'd like to do. So again, gouache, and you could dot some little dots of white coming across. If it's going into the wet paint, it will form a sort of starburst coming out from there, which might be quite nice. You could bring something into this foreground area as well. Obviously this is already white, so you're not going to be able to see white snow coming against a white background. So it's just a Christmassy feeling. Put some white onto the ends of. So obviously if you're clever, you might have already masked these areas out, but you know, sometimes you only decide what you want as you're going along, which is why white paint, acrylic or gouache is actually quite handy for these kind of things. Right, I'm going to let that dry and then maybe put a little bit more detail on the black of the eye and under the beak, but it's nearly there.